All right, good afternoon then, everyone, as we head into a fresh week of trading on Monday, the 25th of March. Now, I'm not going to sit there and go through everything that we went through last week. I mean, check back to the Friday video on that, a bit of a wrap up of last week after a big week of central bank decisions, an extremely busy week across financial markets. Now, we've also got the after effects of that to deal with into this week, and then see what we have to go off in the coming weeks ahead. But kind of fresh news out over the weekend. Some difficulties, we'll say, over in Eastern Europe with kind of Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, you saw the kind of, I mean, the kind of terrorist attack in Moscow over the weekend. Obviously, not nice to see at all. In terms of the reaction to that, I mean, you can't imagine Vladimir Putin is going to take too lightly to that. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the videos on social media and stuff, the kind of reaction to the four guys that carried out the attack, but certainly the retaliation from some source, from some government officials in Russia, kind of seem to think that it was orchestrated by some other countries. I mean, again, I'm not going to get into politics just like that, but do we see some retaliation? I mean, there's now preparation for the largest the biggest scale of bombing, should we say, towards Ukraine. There's a load of fighter jets lined up from Russia to then go into Ukraine and carry out large bombing across that. So is that an escalation of that war over there? It's the first time I kind of talked about this in a long time, and sort of influence towards financial markets. We've had French troops being sent over to Ukraine. You've got then Russia saying they're going to retaliate towards France, and then gonna retaliate off the back of the kind of situation that occurred over the weekend, and that might lead to a bit of an escalation to towards Ukraine, a bit of an escalation over that side of the world. And if you just have a look, you see equities coming off this morning, and you can see the S&P, the Dow Jones, and Nasdaq continuing their moves from last week. Doesn't really surprise me too much. I mean, it's not clear risk off trading anywhere else, but I can't imagine sort of any sort of an escalation over there is going to be positive for risk. I mean, that's something we definitely need to keep an eye on over the course of this week. I mean, with equities pushing lower, you probably expect to see dollar yen push lower, a bit of strength in the Japanese yen, dollar broad-based dollar strength across the board. It's not really what we're getting so far this week, right? Massive US dollar strength to end the week last week. Did have a bit of a chop round on Friday. Be interesting to see how that pans out. A couple of inverse head and shoulders across these currency pairs. A couple of head and shoulders across, or certainly across dollar Swiss and the dollar index. So we'll see how this pans out over the course of this week. I do think equities are worth a look at. It did look like a bit of a flag to want to continue, but it looks like a bit more kind of deterioration up at these highs. Wouldn't surprise me whatsoever we did see that sort of correction, maybe down towards the lows of 5,100 on the S&P 500. I mean, obviously that trend is not going to keep going forever at that sort of speed. Maybe markets also like wakening up to the fact over the course of last week they were probably not going to see those interest rate cuts at the speed that we thought we would see them over the course of this year and then into the future. So maybe we're kind of weighing those two things together. I don't think it's going to be as easy for stocks to push higher over the course of this week, and I do think the path of least resistance for stocks is lower over the course of this week. What that means for the US dollar across the board is a little bit more difficult to kind of wrap your head around. Bitcoin having a good weekend, but ultimately it's still a fair bit off the highs, up at kind of 74,000, 73, 74,000 posted what kind of last week, or 2 weeks ago nearly at this stage. I mean, it's difficult to kind of pinpoint direction. I mean, these yields look like they're topping out. Look like they don't really want to push too far higher. Now that would be yields higher, bonds a bid off the back of a bit of safe haven or its interest. Kind of means different for way of stocks, but I certainly would rather be a buyer of the US dollar. I do think, regardless of how these charts are shaping up, equity markets though, I think they'll be my main focus of attention this week. Probably downside in stocks to come, I think, over the course of this week. Judging off last week, if what happened over the weekend does escalate further, if there is more widespread bombing of Ukraine, then that's going to result in some Western nations getting involved, which we can't really comment on too heavily. But then that brings us on to economic data throughout the US. I mean, you're going to probably I mean, what do you hope for? Strong negative, strong prints or weak prints? You kind of don't really know at this stage. So we'll have to keep an eye on the economic data. But I think regardless of any of this, I think, I mean, any positive economic data probably to be negative for stocks at the moment. It just reduces the need for lower interest rate. Lower interest rates, should I say, from the US. These PCE figures on Friday will be the main focus of attention. The Fed's preferred metric of inflation. If that beats consensus, goes in line with CPI, goes in line with PPI from the week before last, it's definitely a situation where the Fed do not need to cut interest rates like they say they are. I went on a bit of a rant on Friday last week. I don't think they'll cut interest rates as much as they say. I do think they're incorrect in their judgment of it. Oh, let's see how that pans out for the rest of this week. But stocks, main focus of attention for me personally this week. US dollar then goes in line with that. Stocks negative this week. It certainly isn't outside the realms of possibilities.